Have you ever met someone who seems magnetic the moment they walk into a room? They know what to say, how to make you feel seen, how to make you trust them, almost instantly. At first it feels like fate, but over time, something feels off. You start doubting yourself, second-guessing your memory, apologizing when you're not even sure what you did wrong, and you realize you're not the same around them anymore. Carl Jung warned us about these people. Jung wasn't just a psychiatrist, he was a map-maker of the human soul. He explored what most people run from, the unconscious mind. He believed that every one of us carries both light and darkness, and that the most dangerous people are not the ones who know their darkness, but the ones who deny it completely. Jung said, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. When people refuse to face that shadow, when they hide from their own flaws, fears, and desires, the shadow doesn't disappear. It takes control. It begins to live through them. And that's when the charm becomes manipulation. The confidence becomes arrogance. The empathy becomes a weapon. These are the people Jung warned us about, the ones ruled by what they refuse to see. They look ordinary. They can be colleagues, lovers, friends, even family. But once you understand what Jung discovered, you'll start to recognize them instantly, because behind every mask, every charming smile, every perfect persona, there's a shadow waiting to be seen. To understand the kind of people Jung warned us about, we have to understand the map of the human mind he drew, the hidden architecture beneath our personalities. Jung believed that every person has two faces, the one we show the world and the one we keep hidden, even from ourselves. He called the first face the persona. It's our social mask, the version of ourselves we present to fit in, to be liked, to be accepted. We build it over years, the polite voice we use at work, the calm tone when we're angry, the smile when we're not okay. The persona isn't evil. It helps us survive in society. But the danger comes when we start to believe the mask is who we are. Jung warned, "The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society. But if you identify with it, you lose your soul. When the mask becomes the self, authenticity dies, and in its place grows emptiness, the perfect soil for ego and manipulation. Behind that mask lives the other face, what Jung called the shadow. This is the part of us that contains everything we reject or repress: anger, envy, desire, fear, insecurity, all the impulses that don't fit the image we want others to see." Jung said, "To confront a person with his own shadow is to show him his own light." In other words, by facing what we fear within ourselves, we become whole. But when we deny it, when we push it away, it grows stronger in the dark, and it begins to control us from behind the scenes. Most people never face their shadow. They pretend it doesn't exist. But the unconscious always finds a way to express itself. And that's where Jung's third key idea comes in: projection. Projection happens when we see in others what we can't admit in ourselves. We call someone arrogant because we can't face our own pride. We label someone selfish when we secretly crave more for ourselves. We accuse others of manipulation when we're the ones trying to control the outcome. Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The people who trigger us are often mirrors, reflecting the parts of our own psyche we refuse to acknowledge. But here's the danger. Some people live entirely through projection. They don't just slip into it occasionally. It defines how they see the world. To them, everyone else is the problem. Everyone else is guilty. Everyone else carries the darkness they can't bear to face. These are the people Jung warned about most, the ones who never look inward, who wear the persona like armor and let their unacknowledged shadow run wild. They walk through life believing they are pure, while their unconscious wreaks havoc on everyone around them. Once you understand Jung's map of the mind, the persona, the shadow, and projection, you start to see certain patterns appear in people. Not everyone is aware of their darkness, and the ones who aren't are often the most dangerous. Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." These are the people who live completely outside themselves, trapped by the masks they wear, haunted by the shadows they deny. Let's talk about the types you'll recognize instantly. The manipulative charmer. At first, they seem magnetic. They know how to listen, how to flatter, how to make you feel seen. They seem to radiate warmth, but there's something off about the way they always need to be the center of your emotional world. Their kindness has strings attached. Their empathy has an agenda. And when you stop feeding their need for control, you suddenly become cold, selfish, or ungrateful. These people are masters of the persona. They wear kindness like a costume, but underneath it lives a shadow they've buried. Insecurity, fear of rejection, a hunger for dominance. Jung warned that when we repress our shadow, it never disappears. It only becomes more dangerous. And for the manipulative charmer, control is how they keep their own chaos in check. The eternal victim. This one is easy to pity. And that's the trap. Everything bad just happens to them. Every friendship ends because people change. Every relationship fails because the other person was toxic. They never see their role in the story, because taking responsibility would mean facing their own shadow. Jung said, "We cannot change anything unless we accept it." But the eternal victim refuses to accept. They live in projection, constantly casting their inner guilt and shame onto the world around them. To them, accountability feels like annihilation, so they hide behind self-pity and blame, and whoever stays close to them becomes the villain in their personal tragedy. The inflated ego. This is the person who lives entirely inside the mask. They've mistaken their persona for their identity. They don't just have an image, they are the image. Success, power, status, admiration. That's their oxygen. They collect achievements not because they love what they do, but because they fear who they'd be without them. Jung said, "The larger the island of knowledge, the longer the shoreline of wonder." But the inflated ego doesn't wonder. It declares, it must always be right. It must always be seen. It feeds on validation, terrified that silence means invisibility. And beneath the polished surface is a fragile self, one so hollow that the smallest criticism feels like a threat to existence. The energy vampire. They don't just talk, they drain. Every conversation leaves you tired, tense, or uncertain of what just happened. They thrive on emotional chaos, conflict, drama, sympathy. They pull energy from others because they can't generate their own. Jung described this kind of person when he said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." The energy vampire can't do that. They refuse to feel their own pain, so they unconsciously make others feel it for them. Their shadow leaks through every word, every sigh, every guilt trip. These people aren't always evil. Most aren't even aware of what they're doing, but their unconscious runs their life, and anyone close to them becomes collateral damage. Jung once wrote, "In all chaos there is a cosmos, in all disorder a secret order." Even in these people there is a reason for their behavior, a wound, a fear, a shadow they've never faced. But knowing that doesn't mean you have to let them drain your life. Recognizing the pattern is how you protect yourself. Because Jung's warning wasn't about judging others, it was about awareness, about seeing through the mask before it consumes you. It's easy to think we'd spot these people right away. The manipulators, the victims, the egotists, the ones who drain our energy. But we don't. In fact, most of the time, we fall for them completely. And that's because Jung understood something we rarely want to admit. We're not drawn to people by logic. We're drawn by the unconscious. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When we meet someone, it isn't just two minds shaking hands. It's two entire psyches colliding. Our wounds meet their wounds. Our light meets their shadow. And sometimes our shadow recognizes itself in theirs. We fall for the manipulative charmer because they reflect the part of us that wants to be desired, the part that wants to be seen as special, important, unforgettable. Their attention feels intoxicating because it touches something we secretly crave. We fall for the eternal victim because we want to rescue someone, because saving them feels like saving the hurt part of ourselves. But Jung warned us, the most dangerous thing is projecting our own need for redemption onto another person. When we do that, we mistake pity for love and dependency for connection. We fall for the inflated ego because their confidence feels like security. They seem certain of who they are, and we mistake that certainty for strength. But as Jung said, where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. When someone needs to dominate the room, it's not love. It's fear disguised as control. And we fall for the energy vampire because they seem to need us. They feed on our compassion, our empathy, our light. And because we don't want to be cruel, we stay, not realizing that compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. We fall for these people because part of us recognizes them. They mirror the sides of ourselves we've ignored, the ones we've repressed, denied, or tried to outgrow. Jung believed that what you resist persists. So what we run from inside ourselves, we end up running toward in others. Every attraction, every obsession, every emotional entanglement, it's the unconscious reaching out, trying to become whole. Sometimes it chooses the wrong teacher. But even that, Jung would say, is part of the process. He said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Falling for the wrong people forces us to see what's been hidden. It hurts, yes, but it also reveals what's unhealed. And that's the strange beauty of it all. Even when our hearts break, even when we're betrayed or drained, the experience points us back to the only place Jung said real transformation begins: within." Jung didn't study the human shadow just to satisfy curiosity. He studied it because he saw what happens when people refuse to face it. He lived through 2 world wars. He saw entire nations fall under the spell of projection, each side convinced that all evil lived in the other. He said, "The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. In other words, what we refuse to confront inside ourselves eventually appears outside, in our relationships, in our politics, in our world. When we ignore the shadow, individually or collectively, it grows hungry. It turns fear into hate. It turns insecurity into domination. It turns victimhood into vengeance. And on a personal level, the cost is just as high. If you keep giving your energy to people who manipulate or drain you, you start to lose touch with your own instincts. You second-guess what you know. You shrink a little more each time you make yourself smaller just to keep the peace. You start apologizing for existing. You stop trusting your intuition. The very compass Jung believed was the voice of the unconscious guiding you toward truth. He wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But when we live around people who wear masks, we start wearing one too. We pretend. We perform. We suppress our truth to keep their comfort. And slowly we become strangers to ourselves. That's the hidden cost of ignoring Jung's warning. You don't just lose trust in others, you lose connection to your own soul. But the good news is this: awareness is reversible. The moment you start to see clearly, the spell begins to break. The shadow loses its hold. And that's where healing begins, not in blaming the darkness, but in bringing light to it. So what do we do when we start to see these patterns? When we recognize the manipulator, the victim, the ego-driven mask, or the one who drains our energy? Do we cut them out? Do we fight them? Do we expose them? Jung would say, not yet, because the first step isn't about them. It's about you. He said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. In other words, the moment you notice the pattern in someone else, you're also seeing something reflected back at you. It doesn't mean you're like them, but it does mean your psyche is trying to show you something. So before you react, pause. Ask yourself, why does this person affect me so deeply? What are they mirroring in me? Maybe it's your need to be accepted. Maybe it's your fear of rejection. Maybe it's your old belief that love has to be earned through suffering. Awareness is protection. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When you bring light to your own shadow, you stop attracting people who feed on it. But awareness alone isn't enough. You also need boundaries. And boundaries aren't walls. They're clarity. They're the line between compassion and self-betrayal, between helping and being used, between love and control. The manipulative charmer loses their power the moment you stop seeking their approval. The eternal victim quiets when you stop rescuing them. The inflated ego deflates when you no longer validate their performance. And the energy vampire fades when you refuse to be their battery. Protecting yourself isn't about becoming hard or closed. It's about becoming conscious. You don't have to fight darkness. You simply have to see it for what it is. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That means looking honestly at your own fears, your own insecurities, your own needs, and choosing not to let them control you anymore. The more you know yourself, the less others can use your unhealed parts against you. That's the essence of Jung's work. Individuation. The process of becoming whole. The integration of light and shadow, mask and truth, ego and soul. When you live from that place, you don't just recognize toxic people, you stop orbiting around them altogether. Their games lose their pull, their charm loses its spell, because you no longer need from them what you've already found within yourself. Once you've seen the patterns, once you've learned to protect your energy, you might wonder, what now? How do you move forward without becoming bitter, guarded, or afraid to trust again? Jung would say the answer isn't to destroy the shadow, it's to integrate it. Because the shadow isn't just the darkness in us, it's also our hidden power. He wrote, the gold is in the dark, meaning that the very qualities we reject, our anger, our desire, our fear, our pain, are the same places where our strength and creativity live. When you bring your shadow into the light, you don't become perfect, you become real. You stop living as a reaction to others. You stop needing to prove yourself or rescue others, or hide behind your persona. You stand in what Jung called wholeness. He said, "I'd rather be whole than good." And that's the turning point, when you stop trying to be what others approve of and start becoming who you truly are. You begin to see that every manipulator, every narcissist, every energy vampire you've encountered was not just an obstacle. They were a mirror. They forced you to grow boundaries. They taught you discernment. They pushed you to see what you could no longer ignore. Pain becomes teacher. Darkness becomes direction. And the shadow, once your enemy, becomes your greatest ally. Jung believed that integration, not avoidance, is what makes us powerful. He said, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. To rise, you must first descend, to meet the parts of yourself you once feared. That's how you turn the warning into wisdom. That's how you turn the shadow into strength." Carl Jung never wanted us to fear the darkness. He wanted us to understand it. He believed that everything we reject, in others, in the world, in ourselves, is a doorway to deeper awareness. He said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. Because once you've faced your own shadow, you stop being afraid of theirs. The people Jung warned us about, the manipulators, the victims, the egotists, the energy drainers, they're not just out there. They're also within us. They represent the parts of ourselves we haven't yet brought into the light." Jung wrote, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And that's the real message. Awakening doesn't come from analyzing others. It comes from looking inward. From asking, what part of me allowed this? What wound was I trying to heal through them? What have they shown me about who I am still becoming? When you begin to live that way, consciously, courageously, you no longer get lost in the games of unconscious people. You can see their masks without mistaking them for faces. You can see their pain without needing to carry it. And you can love without losing yourself. That's what Jung meant by individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole, of integrating the many parts of yourself until nothing inside you needs to hide anymore. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And becoming who you truly are isn't about perfection. It's about awareness. It's about the courage to meet your shadow, to love what's unlovable, to make peace with what you once denied. Because when you stop running from your own darkness, you stop being controlled by it. And in that moment, you become free. Free to see clearly. Free to choose consciously. Free to walk away from the people who drain you and toward the people who help you grow. Carl Jung warned us about these people, but he also gave us the key to recognizing them, not by judging them, but by awakening within ourselves what they can no longer hide. Because the truth is, you don't overcome darkness by fighting it. You overcome it by illuminating it. And once you've done that, once you've seen through the masks, once you've met your own shadow, once you've reclaimed the power that fear once held, no one can control you again. No one can drain you again. No one can deceive you again, because you'll recognize them instantly, not by what they show you, but by what you've already learned to see in yourself.